Hello everybody, my name is John Mark Johnson Jr. I am the host of Reformed GGA, and today I have an update video for you guys on the subject of the rock in 5.7 by 28 from Palmetto Striped Armory. I have, as you can see, added a red dot to the assemblage, and so I wanted to comment on that a little bit. And I also, with the help of a couple other people on YouTube, managed to figure out how to fix the trigger reset issue. But first, let's go ahead and talk about the red dot. This is one of the Holosun red dots. And by the way, this gun was checked and cleared off camera. But this is one of the Holosun red dots. Let me go ahead and get this turned around so you can see the other side. And it is one of the ACSS Vulcan reticle red dots, which means it has a center chevron and then a circle outside that chevron. Let me see if I can turn it around so you guys can see it here. Alright, so yeah, it doesn't come across on camera overly well, unfortunately, but it gives you the basic idea. So it has a really, really huge circle. And when you have it properly aligned, most of the circle, if not all, depending on how far away you're holding it from you, most of the circle basically disappears and you're just left with the little chevron inside. And the idea is that if you go to present the gun and it's not quite on, you'll usually get at least some part of that circle in the viewing window and therefore be able to correct fairly easily. And frankly, I really like this red dot so far. It's actually pretty useful, especially for people that aren't very familiar with red dots and don't intuitively know how to properly point and present with them. So it helps with that. And then that center chevron is nice. It's a fairly big chevron. It's like a 10 MOA chevron, but of course it comes to a point, so you still have a very finite aiming point. So fantastic in that regard. You know, really easy to pick up with the eye. Still very precise. Works well with people who are new to shooting red dots. All of that is good, and then on top of it, this thing had enough adjustability that I could account for the problems with the iron sights on this gun, because as I mentioned, the iron sights as they come from the factory for this particular serial number, I'm not saying for all of the rocks, but with this particular serial number, the sights were not on at all. But this red dot had enough adjustability to easily account for that, and that's one of the reasons why I went with one of the larger models, one of the C models, instead of one of the K models, is because I wanted that extra adjustability. I think the C models have like 50 MOA of adjustability, whereas some of the K models, depending on the particular model, some of them only have like 30 MOA of adjustability, and this one was pretty far off, so I wanted to get enough adjustability to make sure that it would be able to actually handle how far off things were. And it did fine at that. Also, I was a little bit worried that this one being the bigger C model, that it might mess with the operation of the gun. And with the ammo that I was using, at least, it did not. I've mentioned in the past that the red box ammo, the Federal American Eagle stuff, the 40 grain full metal jacket 5.7 by 28 ammo is a little underpowered, and it doesn't seem like it always feeds particularly well, at least under certain conditions. So when I put this optic on and tested it out, I used the SS197 SR ammunition from FN and didn't have any hiccups at all. No reliability issues, even with it being one of the heavier dots that is out there, so that was a bonus. And a nice surprise was that with this dot on the gun, the ejection pattern stabilized quite a bit. You guys might remember from some of my earlier videos that I complained about the ejection being very erratic. It would throw some brass forward, it would throw some back, and at all kinds of different distances. You know, sometimes it'd be in excess of 10 yards, sometimes it would just be a few feet from me. I mean, the brass went literally everywhere. But with the red dot on there, it now pretty consistently throws the brass back to somewhere between 330 and 530, so it's still kind of wide, but it's all in one general area, and the range definitely varies. Sometimes the brass lands like 3 feet away, and sometimes it's like 13 yards away, so still a little erratic that way, but it's in one general direction now, which I greatly appreciate. It makes finding the brass and picking it up and cleaning up the shooting site much easier when it's all in one general location and you don't have to go 10 yards forward and 10 yards back and then everything basically in the 180. So yeah, it has actually stabilized the ejection pattern quite a bit, and like I said, the red dot is very easy to pick up. It works for new shooters, or at least people who are new to red dots, quite well. Still fairly precise. That is a purchase that I do not regret at all. So great addition that way. And then I also mentioned that I was able, with the help of a couple of other people on YouTube, able to fix the trigger reset issues. That was another thing that was kind of the major complaint that I've had about this gun and all of the videos that I've done on it so far. And as you guys know, I sent it back to PSA to have them look at it. Originally, both the striker was broken and the trigger was not resetting properly, and they were able to fix both of them. But only the reset issue, they only fixed temporarily. It developed the problem very shortly after I got it back. And it didn't develop the problem, but the problem recurred shortly after I got it back. And so that sucked. They did replace the striker, which was good on them. But yeah, the trigger reset issue was still an issue even after I got it back from PSA. And that was really disappointing. I still want the gun to work, and it was just disappointing that I had something that was so close to being a really great concept, but just not quite there. If it failed to reset the trigger during dry fire, it just means that I couldn't really be confident in the gun to actually use it in a real-world scenario, nor could I suggest that anybody else, use this gun in a real-world, defensive-type scenario. And like I said, one of the major complaints there's a few issues, but the major complaint there was it doesn't pass a basic dry fire performance test. Yeah, it wasn't doing it during live fire, but depending on the circumstances, the whole reason why we do dry fire tests, test the reset and things like that, is because they can become issues during live fire, and don't want to rely on something that doesn't pass a basic dry fire test. So, with the help of a couple other people on YouTube, I finally was able to find a solution, and it wasn't me that came up with it. I was part of the diagnosis, but I was not the one who came up with the solution. I will try to provide links to the two fellows who helped me out. One of them diagnosed what the particular problem was, and it turns out it was the transfer bar. Of course, inside the gun, the transfer bar has a little fold in it, and that folded piece that interacts with the rear assembly, you need that fold because it's basically what winds up acting on the sear that releases the striker, so you need it. But it turns out that it was actually just a little too tall, so I filed that little fold down a little bit, not by a ton, and I'm not suggesting that you guys do this. I don't know you, I don't know your gun, I don't know what your skills are. I'm definitely not making giving advice to anyone. I'm just saying what I did. Took that fold and filed down the top of it, and just filing it down a little bit, basically getting down past the finish, and then about as much as it took to take off the finish, that much more. I'm sorry I don't have a really precise measurement for you, because I usually don't use calibers, because I usually kind of do the work on it a little bit, reassemble it and test it, and if it doesn't test right, then I go back and work on it a little more, just little by little by little, until it finally works, kind of thing. So I did that and got it to the point where I can actually perform the test and be just fine. So we'll go ahead and do the original test that it was failing and see that it actually passes. So before, I would go ahead and dry fire the weapon. Like I said, it's already checked and cleared off camera. So you'd get the click like we just heard here. And then I would take the trigger and pull it back and then press to the left. So exert leftward pressure on it and then charge it. And then when I would release the trigger, what you're supposed to get is a proper reset. And so we'll listen here, and you can hear the click for the reset. And then what was happening is before, when I would pull back after getting to the reset, it wouldn't fire again. It wouldn't drop the striker again. But now I can pull again, and I get the striker drop. So now it's actually properly resetting before it wasn't doing that. Before, you would hear the reset click, and then pull back from there and nothing would happen. You'd get a dead trigger. Now that problem has been resolved. And so that part of the whole, should it be used defensively or not, with this particular serial number for this particular gun, that part of the whole, should you use it defensively or not, is now resolved. The gun passes all of its basic safety checks, safety/performance tests, however you want to put them in, but all the basic performance is there. It properly resets when it's supposed to, even when the gun is being cycled very slowly, which is exactly what you want to have. You want it to do everything that it's supposed to do, even when you're moving at your absolute slowest. Typically when it's moving faster, things are a little bit more chaotic and things tend to actually work better with a lot of gun designs. That's the way they're designed, is to work at speed. And so if it can still work even when you're going slower, then you know it's good to go. And this gun actually performs that. Now, as to the whole details of how to take it apart and the particular part that I'm talking about on the transfer bar, I'll put a couple of links down in the description of the video. It might take me a little while to get those into there because I have those links saved on a different device than this one. So I'll upload from this device. Then once it's uploaded, then I'll go back and change the description to get those other videos in there. But like I said, I didn't come up with the solution on my own. It was a couple of other people that helped. There was one guy who figured out that it was just that little fold in the transfer bar that needed to be taken down. And then there was another fellow who had presented a video that goes to the full teardown of the ROC 5.7 by 28. So you can figure out how to get all the different parts apart and all that kind of thing. So like I said, I'll try to remember to provide those links down in the description box. And to round out the video, I will come back to that question of whether or not the gun is actually good to go for self-defense again. Like I said, we've taken care of the reset issue, so it's great that way, but there are still a few issues. One is that it fires 5.7 by 28, and 5.7 by 28 is not a particularly powerful round, so that is still an issue. Do you really want to rely on something that is comparatively weak as far as handgun rounds go? It's also a fairly big gun, and Palmetto State Armory does have plans for making a compact version of this, but the compact version I think is still going to be fairly large. It's still going to have a barrel that's over 4 inches long, so technically compact, but is it going to be compact enough to actually be a good everyday carry gun? Probably not. That's probably still going to be a little too big for a lot of people. And with it being a shorter barrel, it's going to be that much less powerful. So you have a weak cartridge, you have a fairly big gun. Even in its compact form, it's still going to be a fairly big gun. And then on top of that, the trigger in this gun is still not a particularly great trigger. And this one is wildly inconsistent. When I put it on the trigger gauge, I'll get trigger pulls anywhere between 6 1/4 pounds and 8 1/4 pounds. Now granted, I don't have a ton of rounds to this, and with time it'll probably smooth out a little bit. But right now it is really, really inconsistent, and it is very hard to be precise with this thing at distance. And given that it's such a low recoiling gun, I really shouldn't have that many problems with it, but this trigger is on the heavy side, and just with my hand mechanics in this gun, for some reason the brake always, almost no matter how I'm holding it, the brake causes me to come off target just a little bit. And so those really far shots are actually pretty hard with this gun. Up close, if I have fairly big targets, it's a low recoil gun, and so I can move pretty fast up close with fairly big targets. But if it's a really small target, or it's the same size but really far away, my effectiveness with this gun goes down quite a bit. In fact, my SIG, my P365XL, which only has a 3.7-inch barrel, that gun has a little bit different trigger, and of course a little different overall configuration, so my hand mechanics work with it actually quite a bit better. I'm actually more accurate with my SIG and 9mm and a smaller gun, which usually means harder to handle. I'm actually more accurate with it, and I'm also faster with it. So bear that in mind. Now, not everybody that I've had test this gun has had problems with the trigger brake taking the muzzle off target. So far I've had 4 different people shoot it, and 2 of us have had issues with the trigger brake taking the gun off target, and the other 2 have not experienced that problem. And like I said, it's probably just a matter of individual hand mechanics relative to this particular grip angle, this palm swell, etc., etc. That's one of the problems with handguns in general, is that sometimes a particular handgun will work really well for someone, and you put it in the next person's hand who's just a little bit different hand size and whatnot, and it won't work as well. Biomechanics really are a thing, and they affect some people in some ways and other people in other ways. It's just kind of the way it is. So for me, with it being a fairly big gun, with it being a fairly weak cartridge, and this gun having a fairly heavy trigger, and overall shape that does not seem to work very well with my biomechanics, yeah, it's going to still be a pass for me in terms of using it defensively. But now that we know how to fix the trigger reset issue, for someone who's willing to deal with a less powerful cartridge and willing to accept carrying around a physically larger gun, and if their hand mechanics are such that they can get good consistent trigger pulls on it and be reasonably accurate and fast, that's a decision that person is going to have to make. I wouldn't say it would be a bad call for everyone, but in my case, I'm going to keep going with the SIG P365XL because, like I said, I'm more accurate with it and I'm faster with it. And even though I've fixed the reliability issue with this gun, it's still not as fast and accurate as the SIG is. So that's where I am. All right, remember to check the description box for those 2 videos on how I and the people involved have fixed the issue with the resets. Again, I'm not giving advice to anyone on how they should fix their gun or even to fix their gun. I'm just showing what I found and what I did. Whether or not that applies to you, of course, depends on whether your gun suffers from that problem and, issues of your personal skill and all those kinds of things. And I don't know you, I don't know your skill level, so I can't give you any advice that would actually be remotely useful or remotely applicable. I don't know you. I'm just putting those to show what I did and where I got my information from. All right. For those of you who are in Christ, go with God and be blessed. For those of you who are not, I pray that you would come to know Him, the true Christ of history, the only genuine Savior and Master of Masters. Amen.